I'd like to have a chat about the tennis fund.
Yes, let's go ahead and go to those special funds before we go to the police department, so I can speak to that. So I believe it's on page 53, if you're following along. The tennis fund is really just a little subset of the general fund. It has some fee revenue that is contributing to the cost of maintaining the tennis courts historically. And this year, we're recommending refurbishing 2 of the courts, possibly 2 every year to keep them in better shape than they're in right now. And therefore, we would need to supplement the fee revenue with some general fund transfer according to this budget.
Okay, so there was a letter that was sent out to the council members at 4:41 yesterday with regards to an explanation of the fees with regards to the tennis courts. It goes through what the minimum costs are associated with it. Also identifies that there is, we've identified the potential that we need to refurb the whole court for over the whole series of 4 courts for up to $350,000, all for which we receive an income of $8,400 per year. And somebody refresh me, how many Atherton residents actually have a key? 29. And then how many Menlo Park residents have a key?
4.
Okay. So for essentially 29, 30 people, we're going to, we are underwriting, the rest of the town is underwriting just on a normal basis over, $14,000, $15,000 additional, plus there's a potential, and that's without doing all the things that are listed here that we're saying that we really need to do, because there are all these pictures that were also included on this, each is 2 megabits a picture. Just could squeeze those down a little bit. Well, it's true. I mean, they took 15 minutes to open just about. But anyway, and then we're going to have to do a $350,000 refurb on essentially 1 acre of our park, which everybody says, hey, we can't give up an inch of our park for anything. So I guess I'd like to have the council perhaps have a quick discussion on the tennis fund. I'd like to anyway. I kind of already had my comments. Anybody else have any comments on it?
Yeah, I think that it's something we have to really consider. I agree with you. I think that they're costing us a lot of money. And the other thing I want to look at is what we are charging the tennis pro there, because every time I have brought up the fact that we've only got 28 Atherton residents buying keys, some residents said to me, oh, we've got all those kids on the court. Well, all the kids in the court should only be there with the tennis pro, and I'm sure that he's charging all the kids. I'm not quite sure what, I'd like to know what his income is per year from the tennis, and I'd also like to know how much we get of that income. But I agree. I think that the tennis courts are very expensive to serve a very, very small number of residents.
Well, I think one of the reasons why not more residents using the courts is the condition of the courts certainly has declined over time. And I recall for many, many years the tennis revenues went into the general fund. There was not a special tennis fund, and that was only set up I don't know how many years ago, but it was practice to just go ahead and dump it in the general fund, like the play school income is being jumped into the general fund today. My feeling is that, or I feel okay with this year's budget going ahead and having the numbers in there with the proviso that as part of the park master plan work that really needs to be looked at on a long-term basis. If there's any money that is going to be needed for a general improvement of the courts, it's going to probably have to come from outside the town to a large extent, or outside of the town treasury. I don't know what all the sources might be of that. I think there's at least one element of a proposed plan we'll see for the Little League that contains some proposed funds for the tennis court. Whether that'll fly or not fly, I don't know, but I don't feel we're committing ourselves to a $300,000 program, but I do think that there ought to be some maintenance, some attempt to improve the course to some extent to see if we can't get more players out there.
I was just going to point out that since 2008, there was a fund at one time. It said that there was a fund balance, so I assume that prior to that, there was a fund. So for at least, since 2008, there's been some fund. The fund started at $41,699. It's dwindled down, and this year the fund balance is starting at $87,47. It's going down. And if people are not using it because the courts are really not in very good shape, which, the pictures showed, that there were tripping hazards in there, and people said that those could cause a liability for the town, et cetera, and that the only way to repair them was to specifically, finally, do some sort of major rehab, which was going to be priced here, $350,000. So we're looking at a $350,000 over a short period of time to keep this open for 29 people.
In response to your 29 people, and I'm not trying to defend the tennis courts or the tennis fund or anything. I mean, the tennis courts were installed at the park a number of years ago, many years ago, and maybe tennis has lost its cachet with the majority of our residents or not. But I know that a few years ago, one of my teenage sons was still living with us and tried very hard to get a tennis key. And this was before I was on council. This was before I was ever involved in any of the politics, and we just lived down the street. And there was no response from the number that he called that was on the gate or whatever. There was no, it just was made very impossible to get a tennis key. And that was even with somebody who lived real close. I would think that not a lot of residents know that there's even tennis courts that they have the ability to come play on because there's no marketing done, there's no information given to the residents that come buy a tennis key and play at your hometown tennis courts. And the deferred maintenance is significant, and there's no doubt about it. And I feel kind of embarrassed being in town government and letting that happen over the years. But it is what it is. We just, so there are capital campaign, like what Councilmember Carlson was saying, this is a huge amount, and it would need some kind of a marketing capital campaign or money from outside the town. But the current budget, the way it is, I think is something that we can approve and lump along. And I don't know if the objective by the mayor in his objections or comments is to essentially shut down the tennis courts and dig them up. I don't know what the ultimate objective is, but I think that it's a nice amenity for our town if it were, if the residents were informed, and I think that the residents would
My comment, thank you for giving me the entree. My comment is I don't believe that the whole town should be subsidizing a few, 20, 30 people to the tune of potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is documented in this letter.
I totally agree with you, and I said that a capital campaign, money outside. I didn't say that the town would subsidize the $350,000. Yeah.
Well, you did say that. My objective was to dig them up.
Well, no, I didn't say that. I just wanted to ask.
No problem.
Is that your objective?
Thank you for your comments.
I don't know.
The tennis courts were built, I believe it was Wayne Prim of the Howard Prim, Rice, Nowrowski and Kennedy firm, which is no longer that firm, many years ago when he lived in town. They cover about 48,000 square feet, plus a shed, plus a backboard in that area. And for years now, we've tried to figure out a way to fund their repair. Hillview, at one time, Jane Dorst, came to this council in the early 2000s, trying to figure out a way for Hillview students to use those tennis courts. They have been publicized at the schools and throughout Atherton at various times throughout the last decade. But because of their repair, because of the cost of the keys, because of access, they haven't been well used. And I think at some point we have to bite the bullet and do some kind of study and figure out a cost analysis. I mean, we keep putting it off, and I think it's not a question of do we want to do that. I think they serve some people's interest, but I think it's a question of how much do we want to continue to subsidize this, and the liability, which is discussed in the report that we got, and it talks about the spread and the cracking and the fact that it's becoming a hazard. And that's something that we can't continue to ignore. So I think that it's time now, without putting it off another year, for us to make an assessment of truly how many people do use the courts, not just the key holders, but there are other people that do use it in the class. How many people really use the courts? Could we use fewer courts rather than the total number there? What would be the options if we kept all the courts or fewer? The grant money is apparently no longer available. Are there other options? We've done this in pieces before, but I think we have to undertake it in a total picture. And I would request that that's something that we ask Steve to start looking into. Not with the prospect of digging them up, but with the prospect of eliminating a hazard, determining what the real usage is, determining how we can make it a better facility, a safer facility, and end the subsidization by people of the town, or if not end it, at least make sure it's something that as a town we want to continue to subsidize because it's a benefit that enough people feel is worthy. And there are benefits like that. We've undertaken some tonight, and we will in the future. But we want to do it with our eyes open and make sure it's a safe one. So I think that it's worthwhile that we make sure that we ask Steve to do that today rather than a year from today.
Would you like me to go on to the next fund? The next fund? Would you like me to go on to the next fund?
Sure.
The police
Everybody else
grant.
is okay, we're done with the fund.
Is it okay that Steve look into these things? Thank you.
I think that the request was that Steve look into, do a little bit deeper analysis into how many people really are using the tennis courts, and essentially do an analysis of all the costs associated with it, and then also play that back, because there was also a proposal that perhaps maybe we just upgrade 2 courts as opposed to all 4, and possibly then we would, for safety reasons, not have all 4 courts open, but we would just have 2 open until such time we had money for doing the others. So we were going to do those trade-offs. That's how I understood the request. Is everybody okay with that request? Steve, are you okay with that request?
I'm okay with that request. Just so you understand, the resurfacing that's shown on the budget item is to do 2 courts this year.
Okay.
So
The
that'll make 2,
15,000?
that'll get 2 saved, and then, you know,
The 15,000.
that's correct.
So we're talking about $15,000 to resurface 2 courts this
Correct.
year.
How long does
And what's the
resurfacing last?
Normally, public courts are resurfaced every 3 to 5 years. Even good courts, brand new courts.
And these are not good.
These are not good. So yeah, if we went on a 3-year cycle, and then start over again. If they were new courts, you might get a 5-year cycle. When these ones are over, you get a 3-year cycle. But I think having them, we've done them in the past using town staff who did our best with what we had and the funds that we had, using part-time work and do-it-yourself materials. But getting a professional in, such as, Saviano Tennis Courts is the one I consulted with on, because he was familiar with our courts, getting a professional job done, correctly sealing the crack perhaps a little better than we've done it in the past and whatnot. We could possibly get this working for about that price, so.
What about the fact that there's no lateral support on the courts?
That's something that's gonna probably turn this production into 3 years instead of 5 years. We're not gonna be able, 5 or 6 years between resurfacing. We'll have to do it more.
Well, how did you propagate 15,000 from 350,000 that's in the paragraph under section 4? The problem with the courts here is that no lateral support exists around the outsides of the asphalt pole. At this point in time, I'm reading it because people in the audience do not have a copy of this, I apologize. At this point in their lives, the courts are beginning to spread out widthwise, causing cracking evident in most of the court surfaces. See attached pictures, 2 megabytes apiece. In 2009, the estimate, that was several years ago, the estimate for performing court rehabilitation was $350,000.
That's
Now we find a special way to make it 15.
That's rehabilitation.
That's-
resurfacing.
Okay.
It's like the difference between doing a slurry seal on a street and doing a street rehab. A rehabilitation would be grinding the tennis courts out,
Okay.
removing them completely, putting a concrete band around the entire tennis area to hold the asphalt in, and then refilling them. New fencing and all the stuff that would take would come to about $350,000. What I'm proposing right now to make the courts safe, playable, and aesthetically pleasing would be to do 2 courts this year for approximately $15,000. Two next year and 2 the year after that, and then looking back at the first 2 that we did and to see where we're at. And perhaps if we continued that cycle.
What would you do with the other courts while they're waiting to be fixed? Well, I guess that would be in your plan that you're gonna come up with. Would we close them down because there are cracks in them and people could get hurt?
That could be possible.
So part of the study would be looking at the number of people that actually really use the courts. Is that a possibility that
Yes.
that could be done?
I know for a fact that there's at least 2 courts that get very little use out there.
All right, so before we approve the budget, we could have that next month, right?
Alan only uses 1 court, is that correct?
That's correct. When he has his big summer clinic, all 6 get used though. When he has his big 2 or 3 week long summer clinic, that place is going all 6 courts,
Oh, okay, thanks.
sun up to sundown.
Why? And for that, we get how much?
1,600.
$1,600 for that. So what's
I
our
think we
revenue?
need to do and go out for a new vendor.
Yeah, can we also understand the contract, when you bring it back, could we also understand the contract that the town has with Allen?
Deborah,
Well, yeah, I'll put the appropriate staff on this request.
Okay. Thank you. Next fund, please.
Another special fund is the police grants fund. From time to time, the town receives grant money for public safety. In the last few years, with all the budget cuts from the county and the state, we've received a COPS grant, $100,000 per year towards police officer salaries. So that's included as a special funding source. The governor released his budget prelude of a disastrous state budget, and there's a bunch of the finance directors are emailing each other trying to figure out what are they going to do to us next. And the COPS grant has been confirmed that it will be part of the state funding. So we've left that in there, but as soon as we hear any information about what the state has up its sleeve, we'll be bringing that to you. There's nothing in this budget to reflect any contingency. The library fund is the next special fund. It's on page 57. It includes the maintenance of the town library. The library staff is run through the library JPA. It also includes the capital costs that we have identified in order to build a new library. This budget was presented, I believe, to the library committee, and the public works director can speak to that, and it's been forwarded to the library JPA for review.
It was
So-
approved by the library JPA last week.
And, oh, thank you, thank you.
One of the questions I asked was on this particular fund here, looking at the top line, as to the variation in secured property tax number there. Do you happen to know whether that's a net number up there after expenses have been taken out of the property taxes, or just exactly what that number represents?
I don't,
So I'll look into that.
Yeah, I think we should understand that, and I would really like to understand starting out with what the town residents pay property tax-wise into the library fund that the county receives. I'd like to understand the methodology as to what kinds of deductions are made for what kinds of things besides town expenses, and how that gets allocated to the town.
We will do that analysis. The next special fund is the Arts Committee Fund, or the Ellen Creative Design Fund, on page 59. This is a budget that was forwarded to me from the treasurer of the Arts Committee. They approved it at their most recent meeting. And this evening, you approved a budget amendment for this current year to allow them to provide 2 summer family concerts. And so in the 2013 budget, that's also including 2 family summer concerts. So if you don't have any questions on that. The next few funds are the internal service funds. Those are basically monies that are set aside from the general fund or other departments in order to fund certain areas. So we have equipment replacement, which in this fund, we're recommending the replacement of 2 police cars. We've set aside money for replacing the town phone system, and we annually have the Springbrook licensing fees recorded in there for our financial software. There's also a workers' comp fund, a general liability fund, and an employee benefits fund, which I'll be happy to answer any questions about.
Yeah, may I ask a question on that? So,
Yes.
on the police fund, says request number 2, this was in the supplemental. Last year we approved, I think it was on November 16th, for buying a couple motorcycles at a cost of, I have it written down here, $44,000, all outfitted with everything, including radios, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So is this a carryover? What happened to the budget for we only bought one because we bought it at the same time, and I think we deferred the other one as you're showing here. So is this the same fund that we didn't spend, so there's going to actually be an underrun in the chief's budget for this year that we're going to be carrying forward?
We did only purchase 1 motorcycle this year, and
Right.
so we are rebudgeting it for the second motorcycle for next year.
Okay, because when
So
the
there is
chief
a
gave
savings.
us his budget and he showed us where he was going to end up, he was going to end up right on. So he's going to end up $24,000 or whatever, $30,000 lower. Because we didn't spend this money, right?
This is out of the equipment replacement
Okay.
fund.
Okay, so it's-
This is in his
the other thing is that it seemed like, I guess, the cost of the motorcycles have gone up $5,000, is that?
Mayor, a couple of things occurred on that. When I came to council originally, we had the best bid in the state, which was San Diego Police
I
Department.
remember.
And with the timing and everything, that bid expired and we had to piggyback with Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. So it went up a little bit, there was a price increase, we were trying to beat it under the wire. However, what is not reflected in there is the trade-in value that we should receive on the old bike, which we'll be driving down at the end of this month and dropping off.
Okay. And those were about
Well, yeah, well-
3,500 is what you showed on the 16th of November.
Yeah, we hope to get that much, so we've got some horse trading to do down there with them, and if they want us to come back, we're hoping that,
Okay. Because perhaps we would put it in the surplus budget, which is under the guise of our finance director. Maybe we just sell it here. I don't know if we can, but anyway, it's a consideration. On the cars, if I could ask a question on the cars. Also, in that same council meeting on the 16th of November, we approved $70,000 for 2 Crown Victoria cars, fully outfitted, were, you know, essentially $25,000 a piece. And now we're asking for an additional 2. How many cars do we really have here? And I see you giving us the mileage, but I'd just like to understand what the situation is on our police cars.
I received a report from the police department late this evening with the mileage, the age of all of our cars, and how many cars we have. And I'd be happy to forward that first thing.
Okay, that'd be good. Yeah, because that was one question. I just would like to see the overall inventory so we know, so we can anticipate, because it's
Yeah,
kind
Mayor,
of like Chinese water torture.
I'd like to comment on that. I think because we had deferred replacement and maintenance for quite a while, that we're playing a little bit of catch up. And I think we're gonna be in good shape for a while. I think we're gonna have to come up with 2. One of the things I do is, I have the experts come over and take a look at these cars. I get the mechanics from the courtyard come over, and I have them do the compression test and tell us, what do you think the viability is? And from a cost-benefit analysis, should we keep driving this car with 126 miles,
Right.
1,000 miles, or should we cash it out and on the,
Okay.
so the 3 and 4 car are up. Another thing I want to make the council aware of, is we're talking about cars. The Ford Crown Vic Interceptor, which has kind of been the gold standard for police cruisers, is being phased out. And so that means a couple of things. One is a number of staff are going to be going to the rollout of the new police cars. There's some Dodges coming out, there's some Ford Tauruses, and there's also a Chevrolet Caprice again. So we'll be looking at 3 of those and their prices, and you know, depending on where they come in at and what kind of bids we can get on, we'll have to see how that all pans out. But the other potential problem is, we have been taking, because we keep buying Crown Vics, we transfer equipment that fits the Crown Vics from one car to another. Now we're going to a completely, probably different body style, and it's gonna be interesting to see how cable lengths and the cage in the back of the car, the plastic form-fitted seats, a lot of that stuff will not be able to be used. So we continually try to look out front and think about ways we can kind of make things better. It's a constant battle with technology outpacing itself every couple of years, whether we like it or not. So stand by for more information on that. I'll keep the council posted.
Well, so are you kind of saying by your last comment that perhaps we may get different types of cars, or you're going to evaluate which ones you're going to get, or are you definitely going to go with the Crown Victorias and the numbers?
There are no Crown Victorias for us to get.
All right, okay.
Yeah, so we're gonna be looking at, you know, what the industry's recommending and doing some test drives, and also price is gonna be very important.
Okay. And the fact that nobody pulled your contract, we didn't have an opportunity to publicly thank you for considering our asking you to come on board publicly in front of everybody.
Well, I wanna thank all of you. You know, it's been kind of rocky with all the things going on, the review of the department and trying to deal with, you know, some internal issues. And I think it's all been good. You've got a lot of fine people over there working really hard. And I just want to thank all of you, because I've gotten very good support from every single one of you, and it hasn't gone unnoticed. So it makes my job a lot easier. And the community's also been great. A number of people in the audience right here, I don't need to mention names, have been very complimentary and very helpful, and always standing by to give us a hand or some advice, which is appreciated.
Well, it's not on the agenda. We can have the other council members if they'd like to say anything with regards to Ed.
Just welcome, glad to have you.
I told, Bill said to me, well, what do you think? And I said, don't make it difficult for him, we want him to stay. And I said, I've never said that before about any contract that ever has come before us.
Well, I must admit, I'm so happy that you have joined, and several residents have said to me, thank goodness we've now got a police chief. which would sort of indicate the opinion of our previous chiefs. So I think that they're so pleased that you're bringing a whole measure of professionalism to Atherton, which we've needed for such a long time.
Thank you.
Well, I'll add to all of the council members' sentiments that we are very, very glad that you've decided to join us permanently. And thank you so much for doing the hard work that you've done, getting us to this point, and we look forward to a really fine, and you know, one of the things I really love is the tagline that you've put on all the police cars, on the bumper, with integrity, professionalism, and excellence.
Well, you know, I challenged the department to come up with that. They needed to have something that was uniquely theirs. And, you know, while you're on that topic, do you have your coin?
I don't.
No?
I owe you another dinner. I owe you another dinner.
I usually get it in the shower, that's the best time, you can't have it. No, but thank you for that. But, you know,
I don't want to hear anything more about that.
the point being on that is now that the staff has got that on the cars, they have to live that every day, and they know that. They say, don't come up with this, don't bring it forward unless you're willing to live up to honor, integrity, and professionalism. So,
Thank you, so I'll vote for your motorcycle and your 2 cars because you're on board now full-time. Thank you very much. Thank you for your responses, and thanks for joining. Go ahead.
Well, I'm done with the special funds now. If there are no further questions, we can officially go to the police department and have the chief introduce the budget.
well, you know, thanks a lot now that you've stolen half my thunder, but I'll wing it here. Mayor Widmer and members of the council, I really appreciate this opportunity, not only to address you, but the community about the department's proposed FY 2012-2013 budget. And I think that this is a good opportunity to maybe highlight some issues and some concerns, as well as some aspects of the organization which I think are important. As stated earlier by the finance director of the police department's proposed budget is $5.5 million, which represents about 1/2 of the general fund expenditures for fiscal year 2012-2013. I know that a lot of citizens, when they see that, will look at that and seem a little bit shocked, but it is kind of typical of what's going on in the industry. My last assignment as a full-time chief was in the city of Santa Rosa. My budget was $55 million. The fire department's budget was $34 million. Combined, we comprised about 56% of the general fund expenditures. So it's, you know, not that we shouldn't be trying to do something to change that escalation, but it's been with us for a while. In developing this budget, the finance director was really did a good job working with us and going through line by line, and you know, I really appreciate that, Deborah. And we also looked at staffing, deployment strategies, organizational structure, and efficiencies of operations, training, accountability, community responsiveness, and traffic safety. The department also went through a recent team building workshop where we spent some time also talking about budget and the operation. I want to remind the council that back in February 2012, I brought you a recommendation for a reorganization of the communication center, and that's resulting in a savings of about $30,000 annually. I also put a stop to a number of what I consider redundant programs and expenditures, like, for example, crimereports.com. That's a savings of about $1,200 a year. It's not a lot, but I believe everything counts, and we don't need to spend money on things we really don't need. As mentioned earlier, we are slated to get the $100,000 COPS grant for police officers. The department's going to continue to focus on maximizing the use of reimbursement training from post peace officer standards and training. And it's been my rule in the department, and it's well known now, that we always look out ahead to where training is going to be held. So if we have no option but to go out of town for mandated training that has to be done under certain timelines, we will. But if we can slip it a couple months and do it locally or piggyback with another agency, that comes first. We also intend to, utilize a number of funds from ABAG to help us in our risk management area. In fact, we have a course coming up that we're offering here and opening it up to other agencies that ABAG's paying for with Gordon Brand. At the same time that we're trying to look at ways to cut and save money, we have some challenges, increases in fuel, maintenance, as well as a number of our service contracts, CORA, which is Community Overcoming Relationships Abuse, First Chance, which is where our inebriates go to. They're tied into JPA and the work with this San Mateo Police Officers Association, and we get kind of locked into those. We don't have a lot of alternatives. We can't take inebriates to the jail in the numbers that we had before because they don't have room for them. So there's a lot of moving pieces with some of these contracts. The other one that continues to be a concern of mine, and we've been looking at, and I know that city managers have had multiple discussions about this, and it's our animal control contract, which is really quite high, considering the number of service calls that Atherton generates. And we could go over that sometime. But again, it's a JPA, and we've got to look at ways of dealing with that. I know that all the other chiefs have concerns about that, so I'm going to stay engaged and involved in that. There was something in the paper, I think you probably saw it, about animal control in Palo Alto and how they might, move in a different direction with the Humane Society.
And for the people in the audience, it's about $60,000.
Yeah, it works, if I'm not mistaken, it works out to quite a bit of money per visit. But it's one of those things we have to provide that service. We talked a little bit about replacement of vehicles and equipment and the longevity of that. And just like with most motorcycles, I won't hesitate to defer something if I think it's reasonable and appropriate. I just don't go lockstep and buy things because the money's there. And I know the mayor